Hey folks, this is Brian back with another Elderath session. So it is the year 684 of the Lords of Bloodstone, which is year 28 of the Lady Tamara, which is also the seventh year 7 of the Zodiac, which is called Grailus, which is the fasting, vows, and initiations year. It is the second month of the year, Alor, which is spring. It's week 4, day 5. And tracking dates is important for this player in this game, as we'll touch on that at the very end. Anyway, so we did a little retcon of Heta's disappearance. She didn't really just disappear. A couple of us made some scan rolls, so we noticed that as we're discussing things, she's kind of wanders off with some other folks and goes on by, just leaves us there. But later on, in fact, the next day we get an invitation from Herman to visit with him in his shop. And it's across the East Gate Bridge. And the map is in the live play, which is in the description. And once we get in outside of the city walls, to the south across another bridge, I think there's another bridge, is a market area. Then there's these shops and warehouses and stuff, and further south of the walls is more port facilities. So anyway, we go visit Herman at his place, and it's a mess. The GM goes into great detail about how messy this place is. Even because it's kind of like a pawn shop here, mixed max of all kinds of strange things, right? And then he takes us back to his warehouse, which is more of the same. And he kind of mentions, that they send parties out in the past to gather, curiosities from the old Forg kingdom, and this is some of the stuff they get. So he tells us that he is proposing a venture that relates to some recent unfortunate occurrences. To the northeast are some mines that have were active during Forge Day, and they have mostly they've been undiscovered. Right, they're out in the mountains where it's dangerous and people don't find that kind of thing. But a few have been found and have been reopened and brought back into service. They got some disturbing news of a rather large mine that had been producing rather well, but recently the investors became concerned because the production has been dropping, and has actually all but stopped. So they sent some investigators out to find out what's going on. They came back with disturbing reports and some artifacts, which caught the attention of the guild historian Kesh. And when we say guild, we mean the Wizards Guild, the Magicians Guild. So Forg had a number of caches of magical weapons and stuff and things. And once he was defeated, where those things were, nobody knew. And so on occasion, people stumble across these things. And they theorized that reopening this mine got people access to one of these caches. And then he goes, because this brings up, especially out front, a lot of concern about danger. And he talks about, all these things are generally well defended. It's been, 1,000 years or so. So, they probably diminished over time. Anyway, the guild historian is interested in investigating this particular mine further. And so the Baron has sanctioned this venture to go check out this mine. And we, as a group in this contract, are tasked with two things. One, to establish safe passage for Master Kesh, and two, to supply security while he conducts his investigation. We will be working under the captain of Kesh's personal security guard, And while we are not personally responsible for his well-being, obviously, any interactions with us and the party as a whole will weigh heavily on any future operations, right? So potentially long-term lucrative opportunities here. So that's Herman's piece. Okay, so he does mention there is a potential for great danger in investigating these things, and no one wants dangerous artifacts in the hands of anybody, right? And so this goes into page 5 of the contract where it talks about all artifacts found will be evaluated for their safety, right? And dangerous artifacts will be confiscated. Confiscated is not the right word. Will be guarded properly. There, that's a good word for it. Guarded properly. Um, but there is a provision for any safe artifacts to be distributed among the parties of the entire expedition, of which we are eligible for 1/10 of the value of the fines. So everything will be evaluated for how much it's worth, and so there's some kind of um, deal at the end kind of thing. Okay, all these artifacts together worth X amount. 1/10 of that is what the party can access, and I don't know who gets first choice kind of thing, but that's how it's going to work. Plus, we get uh, paid as well, our engagement fee, which turns out to be equivalent to a free man's wages, which is like your city guard kind of thing, which is, and we get into a little side discussion on value and cash and that kind of thing, which is 60 silver a year, and there's 8 months in a year. So, and Herman's planning us being out there for a month, and so that's what we're getting paid for. Well, a month is 7.5 silver, and he's going to give us 1/4 of that up front, which is, just less than 2 silver. 18, almost 19 copper. But again, that tied into this whole discussion of what is cash really worth. I mean, we're talking about freeman's wages, so I guess you could call that 60 silver $60,000 a year, right? In which case, we're getting fronted almost $2,000. Yeah, that's not bad. Okay. So a week goes by, and this ties into the whole taking a week off and rolling our check marks, that kind of stuff that we actually did physically previously. But this is when that occurs. And a couple days prior to the end of this time period, a runner comes and tells us to meet in the market in front of Herman's shop, on Veldor, the 5th day of the week, in the morning for departure. So we get there, and Raymond and Tindo recognize this one female guard. She's the captain of the guard of the Sylvanus Temple, and she and at least one other of the guards are outfitted in the equivalent of half plate, right? And her name is Sind, and she's talking with Raymond and okay, who's like in charge of your group here, and they point to me, so because Raymond, the player who runs Raymond, wasn't able to be there, and so Raymond and I kind of toss it back and forth by trying to push it his direction. So she comes to Wes and introduces Wes and Krim. And Krim is her lieutenant. So Krim is also one of the temple guards, right? But she's the one in charge of protecting Kesh, the guild historian for this expedition. So she's the captain of the guard here. So introduced together, we talk, discuss things. Hey, got it. What our job is. You run things. We're here to support. And so we all start, lining up and that kind of thing. And we're all in the back. There are 2 more temple guards behind us. Total of 12 temple guards, half of which have crossbows, and all of which have lances, except for Krim and her sergeant, which do not. So you've got these little pennants. There's like 8 of them up front, right? And there's 2 in the back, and then there's us in the back, but in front of them, and there's you know a wagon with like springs and stuff. Um, That's what, Kesh is riding in, right? And then there's supply wagons and all that kind of stuff. So a pretty big little caravan here leaving town, and it becomes quite the spectacle. So there's lots of gawkers and people following along, and everybody opens their windows as we go by on the road out of town. Uh, and so it took us 5 days total travel to get to the mine area. And rather than role playing that stuff out, we just kind of generalize, okay, this kind of stuff, at night we'll talk with the guards and we'll, chit chat and get to know each other, and we'll ask certain types of questions, what's it like out here, and where's this and where's that and what's going on and that sort of thing. So outside of Kars are some smaller communities, right? And a handful are ruled by some jarls that have not adopted the more civilized ways that people in town have. So the city folk are a mix of the Northern Kingdom's culture and this local Norse culture, right? But then out here are strictly Nordic kinds of guys. And there are 3 specific ones they mentioned that are a greater threat than everybody else. But even they are nothing compared to the slavers out in Minot and Goldak, right? And they talk down about these jarls, the short-sighted and the selfish. And they are good fighters, and they can certainly build some good ships too. I'll talk about in the mountains, there are tribes of orcs and other remnants of Forg's kingdom. And in fact, if we cross over this mountain range, you can see to the north here, we will be in the remnants of Forg's kingdom. And from time to time, strange things come out. Werewolves will come out, giants will come over, all that kind of thing. And so the armies of Kars will have to come out and take these things down and protect the countryside. Along the way, one of the players brings up a story about how Wes had killed a white, and so there's some discussion and talk about that, how I do that, and that kind of thing. And Wes downplays his own part in things. He also doesn't like to discuss artifacts of power and what he may actually have access to. So we just kind of generally discuss that. He's a practitioner of the arcane arts, and he nearly drained himself completely to put this white down, and it included the help of others with magic weapons. Okay, as we go along past another small villages, we're talking about just a couple hundred people until we enter into the foothills. At one point, the caravan stops, and the sergeant rides ahead to check something out. And he comes back and reports. I know this caught Wes a little by surprise that he reported to Kesh first and then went to Sind. Or the lieutenant, the captain, whatever her name is. Yeah, Sind, right? No. Her name is Prim. But I thought it was kind of odd. But anyway, as we get up there, we see there's a dead horse, a burned wagon, there's arrows everywhere. Just, scan as we go by because we're not going to impede the caravan. We've got our little box. We do notice some potential drag marks. So something to keep back of our head kind of deal. But we should reach the mines midday tomorrow kind of thing. And that night, I think it was Runt noticed some smoke to the southwest, but the guards around us don't seem to care. The next morning, Wes does mention that to Krim. And she says that's probably Jarls. They do that kind of thing, raiding each other and that kind of deal. So she doesn't really think too much of it either. Okay, so we come to the Healy area. There's an escarpment. We make camp. And there's an actual routine. So somebody's making breakfast, and we're a part of that. So we have breakfast with everybody. After breakfast, Wes meets with Lieutenant Prim, and asks her, okay, what are your intentions for us? And she kind of looks like, weren't you briefed on the contract? Okay, I just was looking for a thumbs up. Roger that. We're scouting ahead. We're gonna make sure it's safe before you guys go in. Got it. Okay, so I go back, grab my guys, and we start heading up to the cave entrance when the wizard starts freaking out, asking, when are we gonna get ready to go in? And then he sees us, and we go, where are they going? And so he gets all agitated and runs to catch up with us, and he starts talking about all the dangers and to stay away from the men here and some other stuff. And I think it was Runt again, mentioned something about doors. you know about doors, you know, because we don't know where all these doors go, so you shouldn't really go through any doors, that kind of stuff. So roger that. But you know, eventually the lieutenant comes up with some of the folks, and so Wes talking with the old man, lieutenant. Okay, we're scouting ahead to make sure it's safe before you come in, so we can provide security. Oh, okay, okay. He feels better about that now. That we're just scouting ahead. You know, not don't touch anything, don't break anything. So when we go, okay. Um, and again, you know, live play if you want to follow along some of this stuff. And I do watch some, well, listen to some live plays, but I do it at like double speed because that's in my books at double speed, so I can keep up with some of the verbiage. You know, you don't need to track every single word anyway, right? Just get the feel for what's going on to get some ideas and things. But you can see the map from the live play. So we go in, it splits. To the right, actually ended by the latrine shortstop. Left's got a track, so we follow the track down, and it comes to an intersection. We go north, and there's another intersection, but just before this intersection is a little kind of alcove place that Runt saw something in. So he goes and checks it out, and it's actually a dead body. So he grabs the body and tries to drag it out so we can take a look at it, see what's going on. And he does notice that this thing was stabbed in the back. But as soon as he starts to heft it up, it turns and tries to bite at him. It's a zombie, so he drops it, runs back. The zombie comes crawling out. Raymond's there, Tindo's there. Tindo pulls out her silvered mace thing and whacks it in the chest. Got a really good shot. Puts it down, but the eyes are glowing red, which is a first for us dealing with undead with glowing red eyes. And its arms, even though the chest was crushed, it's on the ground laying there. The arms are both moving, the legs are both moving. So Raymond tries to whack it in the head, put it out, kind of thing. But he's using a sword, and swords do less damage to undead or something like that. But anyway, it doesn't seem to do anything. And so Tindo, go here, crush this thing up. So Tindo whacks at it, breaks one of his legs. That leg stops moving, but the other leg, both arms are moving. So he goes to crush the skull and crushes the skull, but the arms and the other leg are still moving. And apparently, there's still a red glow coming out of the skull, right? So he breaks it all up. Okay, this is a new kind of undead. And so we theorizing on what had happened. Oh yeah, because it looked like this guy, body's a couple weeks old, a week or two old. I got stabbed in the back and then crawled in this corner to hide, like there was a fight out here, kind of thing. So we start looking around for tracks, and Runt fumbled his tracking roll, and so he declares outright, "Yeah, he came from down here. I can see these claw marks as he climbed up." So we dropped down. This intersection's got a drop down heading off to the northeast, and two passageways, one going southwest, one going northwest. So we drop down, we start going along, and he's convinced. After a ways, the tunnel itself turns. In fact, there's a track down here too. Oh, and the tracks are wood, by the way. They're just wooden tracks. Oh, and we did find a cart at the end of the track up above where we were just now, with ore in it. Okay, so we're down in this, down a cliff face, not cliff face, a drop off, and there's no track. And the track goes and then turns to the northwest. But then there's an opening to almost the direct north, and so he's convinced that the murdering thing happened inside that area. So he goes in there. It's just a little hole. There's like a little shelf, and there's some cups, and so somebody was like eating lunch here, kind of thing. But he can't find anything else. So we decide, well, let's follow the track, the wood track further. And we get to a point where it stops, and there is a cart there, but it's been broken up. And it's getting lower. After this point, it's getting lower and lower, like 3-foot ceilings, 2.5-foot ceilings. So we're like crawling around at this point. And people are making listen rolls. We can hear rats out there somewhere. And there's a split at one point. We're continuing going northish. And Alexander's up front with Tindo. and they come up into a little kind of room, and there's a stench coming out of this room, stench of death. So rat noises and the stench of death. Got it. Um, there's kind of this bowlish shaped piece of ground in front of them, right? And I didn't quite catch if the bowl was in the ground or if it was actually raised, like one of those water drip things. But now I think it probably was, level with the floor, just bowl down. But there's this big rock in the way, and as Alexander looks around the rock, these giant rats pop up over the lip of the bowl and attack. Ah! So they're fighting giant rats, and throughout this fight, Alexander makes a boatload of specials and critical successes on both attacks and parries. And so he managed to take out a handful of rats. But then this little rat man with a short sword comes up out of the bowl, and then an undead comes up out of the bowl. And at that point, things, kind of change because you got giant rat, you got the rat man who's not only striking with the sword, but is biting at him. And, he's trying to make all these parry stuff, and he gets whittled down a bit. In fact, he ends up with just one hit point left at the very end. And Tyndall gets hurt bad, so she disengages and starts coming back. At that point, once she gets back far enough, Wes is the next one in line, kind of thing. At that point, because he was walking down one of the other trails, takes his place, goes up front, does an impale on the giant rat that was following her down, kills it, and then gets up close with Alexander. But at this point, all the giant rats are dead, and Alexander had just killed the little rat man. But there's still this undead thing, which Wes struck at. He's got room now to swing. But again, he doesn't have a silvered weapon, and it's not magical, so it's not doing any damage to this thing, which is a new factor for undead that we've run into here in the East. Back in the Moat House, swamp area, there wasn't really that kind of an issue. So Wes, dealing with rapier, d6 plus 1, although it's steel, so it is d6 plus 2, doesn't really get through armor with that kind of thing, right? And so he's been experimenting with casting Shock Bolt round 1, and then triggering it on round 2 in conjunction with an attack, so that he does the rapier damage plus the shock bolt damage, and hopefully that would be enough to get through, right? And so instead of doing a d6 plus 2, he's doing a d6 plus a d4 plus 2 kind of thing. So it's like a although he's got enough modifier leeway. He's got an extra 7.5% negative that he can go before actually starts going negative in his skill, because he's got his meditation bonus throughout for his casting his spells, right? So his armor takes his percentage down, but it's compensated with by his meditation skill, and that compensation leaves him with 7.5% left over. So he can always overcharge by 1 point, which is a -5%, and still be within his normal skill range. But he's also got that focus, the skull thing, which gives him a +20, plus he rolls lots of magic points. So that's what saved him fighting that white. If you saw the previous, time ago game where he was fighting the white, he was pumping 4, 5, and 6 point shock bolts into the thing. He could only do that because of this focus on that +20, right? So, well, I wasn't thinking about it at the time. His standard attack would have been a 2-point shock bolt with the rapier, but he just did a 1 point. But he failed. I remember he failed something. I think he failed the shot. No, he made the shock bolt because he got the +20. Must have missed the attack. But at this point, Alexander's down just 1 hit point. And so West, standard shock bolt, 4 points. He's overcharging by 3. Only got 7 points of damage. 2 1s, 2, and 4, 3, I guess. But yeah, it just not seem like a lot of damage. But it was enough to take the zombie thing down. So Alexander grabs the little rat man. Well, grabs the sword, right? Because the sword, when he was fighting against the rat man and they did like a parry kind of thing, the little sparklies came across. So there's something up about the sword. He figures it's magical. Well figures it's magical. And Alexander's sword is enchanted by 1 point. So we're thinking magic, maybe it does that kind of thing. So this thing's probably magical too. So he takes the sword. We all notice when he holds onto it, he stares at it for a second. And he had to make a roll, but we don't know what it's about. So he's all paranoid about being cursed or something. Puts it in the bag, but he wants to take this little rat man out and show the wizard guy, hey, what is this thing? And so we drag it back with us. We go to that central area where the drop off was and where the other zombie was. And we did check down that one pass that Wes was watching. It just dead ended. So we get back to that central area, head south. No, head north. Northeast, northwest rather, and dead ended if I remember right. And then we went southwest, and that went along, and we did notice in a couple of spots around here that fresh mining has been going on. There's like iron ore right here on the ground. And like we mentioned in the carts, there's always been iron ore. In fact, in the bowl thing, there was a pick, a shovel, some standard mining type gear stuff, and iron ore. So something came through quick and just stopped all the mining. And there's some kind of like evil spirits or something possessing these undead. They're different here. But anyway, so we're going down this track. It's got a track. Again, there's a cart at the end. I believe this one was not. This one was solid. It wasn't broke up. Again, more iron ore down here at the end. And then it splits. There's a shaft coming across to another shaft, and so we're getting almost lost. But we come to a little hammerhead double end, dead end kind of thing with mushrooms. And so Alexander does one of his nature's ways and finds out what kind of mushrooms are. If people like, this type of mushroom that some people like, and they're good to eat. And they grew here. And at that point, we're hitting midnight my time. So okay, we need to cut off. And I think that's where we ended, about that kind of area. So we're fairly deep into one route, but we figured the map's like this big and we've gone like this. So there's still lots of stuff to explore. Runt is very, very concerned about using up magic points, and we have to use magic points to kill things. And that kind of deal. But we all know that everything to behind and to our right essentially is all clear. We've cleared all that out. There's nothing, so we're safe to this point kind of thing. And that's what we're here for. So that was our adventure. Holy cow, 28 minutes. Sorry guys. That was our adventure last night. Happy gaming.